Now I'd like to discuss another figure in Iraq. In modern Iraq, the point I wanted to make very quickly is, why did this happen? Why would Shahid Baqir al-Sadr not helped the Kufan mentality? That's what it all comes down to. Kufan mentality. The Kufans never died, and Kufa is still alive. Kufans will always be Kufans wherever they are. Now I want to come to another great personality that we have in the day and age today. That person is Ayatollah Sistani. Okay. Now, before I go into this, I'd like to point out, I used to follow Ayatollah Sistani, and I loved him, and I love him today. He is Ayatollah Sistani. How can we not love him? One of the reasons why I changed my taqlid, and this is, I'm talking like 10 years ago, back in the day before I even came to Qom, is because whenever I saw a picture of Ayatollah Sistani, he always looked sad. There is this intense sadness in that man's eyes, and it always bothered me. It made me worried. It made me think. Remember in the previous session how we discussed, some people want an oppressed leader. Some people want the leader to be oppressed, and they prefer an oppressed leader. This is what it comes down to, okay? I remember seeing a video of Ayatollah Sistani. He's sitting, and a scholar approaches him and holds Ayatollah Sistani's hand and tries to kiss his hand. Ayatollah Sistani jerks his hand away. Lots of people saw this video back in the day, and they thought, oh, this looks really strange. That looks really rude. And I was thinking to myself as well, that looked kind of, why did he do that? Now we'll start to understand. He wasn't being rude. He just didn't want that individual to kiss his hand and then to take a picture and share it with everybody and say, look, I kissed Ayatollah Sistani's hand. Maybe that was it, okay? But people have expressed doubts about the office of Ayatollah Sistani. Okay, people have seen that there has been mismanagement of money, or that certain answers don't get answered properly. There have been these doubts raised. And all of these things were going around in my head. And at a point, the thing that did it for me is I wanted a leader whose voice I can hear, a marja. I didn't want just a marja anymore. I wanted a leader. If I can't, and I realized I've never even heard the voice of Ayatollah Sistani. How do I know that what he's saying is accurate? How do I know that what I'm being told he's saying is actually from him and not from somebody else? How do I know that somebody else isn't twisting the words of Ayatollah Sistani? How? I started to ask these questions to myself. Now I'm going to tell you 3 points that I have seen myself from eyewitnesses, people who I trust, my close friends, some of my closest friends actually, who have seen these things with their own eyes. The first of them is, one of my friends was sitting in the company of Ayatollah Sistani, and there were these other people. He's always surrounded by other people. If you notice, he's always surrounded by the office and the representatives of Ayatollah Sistani and those kinds of people. There was one particular person who is very close to Ayatollah Sistani, very close to him. I don't want to mention exactly who he was, but one of the people who is one of the key people who is in Ayatollah Sistani's closest circle. About that person, Ayatollah Sistani said, Khuda kune khudash bere. One of the blessings of being a Hausa student is we can speak Farsi, which means that when we go to visit Ayatollah Sistani, we can actually discuss with him directly. There's no translator in between. Okay, we can discuss with him and he replies and we hear what he says. They were talking about one of these people who was very close to him, and Ayatollah Sistani said this, which means God, I hope God makes him go away. It's like a flippant way of saying, I wish he just got out of here. I just want him to go. I want him to leave. This is how Ayatollah Sistani spoke about somebody in his closest circle. I want to point out, am I raising a finger on Ayatollah Sistani's akhlaq? Am I saying that he doesn't? God forbid. I would never do that, and that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to highlight that there are people who are close to Ayatollah Sistani who are maybe manipulating the entire scenario, okay? That Ayatollah Sistani cannot speak for himself many a times because of those who are around him. there's another, that's the first point. The second point is, one of my close friends, dear Said, I won't mention his name, but he's a Hausa student just like me, on the same level as me, okay? And he's actually from the West as well, from England. He had the blessing of actually going and having an audience with Ayatollah Sistani. He sat with Ayatollah Sistani and he talked to him. And he's talking to Ayatollah Sistani, he asks him all these kinds of questions. And he asks him then about Wilayatul Faqih. He says, what is your opinion about Wilayatul Faqih? Ayatollah Sistani, without hesitation, says, Bisyar muhimmast, bisyar muhimmast, bisyar muhimmast. 3 times, very quickly, he says, it's very important, extremely important, it's very important. And then he starts to say something. Before he can finish his sentence, this friend of mine was grabbed from behind and physically removed from the room. And I asked him several times, what do you mean? Are you exaggerating? Do you mean that, they asked you to stand up and leave? He said, no. They stepped on my foot. They were so eager to get me out of that room before Ayatollah Sistani could even finish his sentence, that it was as if I was dragged out. I was half dragged and half collaborating with them and moving with them, okay? Why? You see, many people have this misconception that Ayatollah Sistani is on one side, Wali al-Faqih is on the other side, the revolution is on the other side. No, this is a complete lie. Ayatollah Sistani is with the revolution. He is one of the revolutionary hopes that we have in Iraq, okay? But why does this mentality exist? It's because of this. He's not allowed to even open his mouth about it. This is the way those people who are around him behave. And I want to give you a third story now. And this is from a sheikh who's very close to me. And if he's listening, may Allah bless you. And I hope you don't mind me sharing this with others. He said this. This sheikh, he goes to visit Ayatollah Sistani. At the door, he stopped. The people at the door, the first question they ask him is, how much money do you have? Because a lot of this, unfortunately, is to do with money. Remember, there's an excess of millions of dollars, let's leave it at that, going through that place. And a lot of people are going to get corrupted by that amount of money, okay? But anyway, he approaches, and the first thing they ask is, how much money do you have? The sheikh, he has an attitude, he gets angry about these kinds of things. He says, that's the first question you ask me? That's the first question you ask me? How dare you? I'm here to see the Agha. I have a personal question for Ayatollah Sistani, and I need to ask it. The guy at the door, he says, well, you can ask me. I'll ask Ayatollah Sistani I'll answer it on his behalf. He says, I don't think so. That's not the way it works. See, this is a difference between Hawzawis. When you're in the Hausa system and you've studied and you've spent enough time in the Hausa, it gives you a little bit of an edge and you understand how these kinds of things work. So the guy at the door, he realizes, oh, okay, this guy knows how it works. I can't really stop him. He's not just an ordinary person. They let him through. He goes in, he asks Ayatollah Sistani his personal question. Ayatollah Sistani responds to it, and they give each other salams, du'as, etc. Sheikh gets up. He's about to leave. This is how the Sheikh narrated it to me. He said, I was about to leave. Ayatollah Sistani grabbed my abba from behind. He grabbed the hem of my abba. And so I turned around and he says, Muzaffar, I will never forget the way that he looked at me. His look was full of so much, it was just so grief-stricken. And his eyes have scarred me. I won't ever forget the way Ayatollah Sistani looked at me. And he said something to me. I said, Ya Sheikh, what did he say? He said, well, he looked at me and he said, pray for us. We are prisoners on the outside as well as the inside. Ayatollah Sistani said this. Okay, these are 3 points that I wanted to highlight. And now I want to come back to the point. Remember, we said that some people have this mentality where they don't like the idea of leadership. They want a mazloom, an oppressed, a helpless leader. As long as a leader is oppressed and helpless, they will love him. The moment he has power, they will start to hate him. And we gave the analogy of Ibn Muljim, who loved Imam Ali. He was a Shia of Imam Ali alayhi salam. But then when Imam Ali gained power, he suddenly hated Imam Ali, and he ended up martyring our Mawla, Imam Ali alayhi salam. This mentality exists today, and it is part of the mentality of the people of Kufa. Now, I have to point out here, lots of people forget Ayatollah Sistani himself is an Iranian as well. Okay, just a quick point there. Did you know that there were people outside of his establishment in Iraq protesting against him in Iraq, holding up pillows and saying, why are you not saying anything? Why are you not saying anything? Lots of people don't know about this. They were protesting and mocking Ayatollah Sistani in this way. This is how mazloom Ayatollah Sistani is. This is how helpless he is, okay? And this is the reality. We need to wake up and realize this is what's going on, okay? Now, the conclusion that I personally have drawn, and inshallah, everybody is welcome to draw their own conclusions, because these are just dots, and I'm not even connecting them. I'm presenting these dots. But how I've connected it for myself is this: Ayatollah Sistani does not speak unless he is willing to sacrifice his life and just, whatever, he absolutely needs to say something. Other than that, he won't speak. Okay, and he only says those things at certain times when it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, he will just never give direction. And I want to give you an example. Tatbir. I have seen it with my own eyes, the fatwa of Ayatollah Sistani. He spoke against it. He said tatbir should not be done. It is harming the reputation of the faith. It is harming the reputation of Shia Islam. He said it himself. Okay. But then he had to revoke it. And then his office releases a statement explaining why he's withholding his opinion. A marja who cannot even highlight that for us. He's been made this helpless by those people who are around him, by those people who have this Kufan mentality. Imagine what this ummah has become and why it has become so. Okay, and people claim to love Ayatollah Sistani, but they don't actually love him. And I'll give you another example. One of those times where Ayatollah Sistani absolutely was willing to risk everything, he didn't care what they do to him, he stands up and he says, no, this has to be done, is in regards to Hasht al-Sha'bi. Right now, there's rallies taking place, alhamdulillah, in London for the sake of Hasht al-Sha'bi, they are the popular resistance movement in Iraq. It is because of the fatwa of Ayatollah Sistani and the steadfast resistance of the groups like IRGC in Iran and other places as well. Because of this collaboration, that ISIS was defeated. It is because of that collaboration, have no doubt about it. Hasht al-Sha'bi is the army that was raised in Iraq, okay? But the same people, particularly in the West, I'm coming to the West now, and the East, those people who claim to love Ayatollah Sistani, look at what they did for Hasht al-Sha'bi. Nothing. These same people, they were claiming to love Ayatollah Sistani. You go 7 years back, they were claiming and saying it with their own lips. Politics and religion is completely separate. Completely separate. They'll deny it now because now it just seems silly to say it. In 2020, it just seems like ridiculous. Of course, politics is part of Islam. Nobody's going to admit that they used to believe that it's actually separate, right? But back then, they used to say that. When Ayatollah Sistani passed the fatwa and said that it's wajib to defend Iraq and the other lands and fight against ISIS, all these people suddenly thought, whoa, is our marja telling us to go and fight? Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. The point is, did they help that cause? Not at all. And they did. There were some scholars, Kufan scholars again, they took pictures of themselves in England. They took pictures of themselves holding guns. And they shared it around on social media so people would think, wow, you're a hero. They didn't fight. They just stayed in England. Right? There was scholars. Did anybody actually help fund? They didn't even help with funds to fund those armies to fight against ISIS, okay? This is the hypocrisy that we're surrounded by. These are the people. If you can't see the Kufan mentality that exists, then wake up and look at it.